This is Sunday evening, June 1st. This morning in church we remembered the Ascension of Jesus. 40 days after his resurrection, his disciples watched him rise up into heaven. When I was a kid, I always thought that resurrection meant going up, like you rose from the dead, and that meant you went from here to heaven. But this tells of the story at the end of 40 days of Jesus having risen from the dead to here, to being here with everybody, and then at the end of that time, ascending into heaven. And so the story is a little different from, or the idea of resurrection is a little different than just Jesus coming back to life. When I was a kid, I grew up in Chicago, and I lived within earshot of the fireworks at Comiskey Park, the baseball stadium for the Chicago White Sox. And any time that one of the White Sox hit a home run, they'd shoot off fireworks, even during a day game. It wasn't about the fireworks in the sky, it was about making a loud noise that everybody in the neighborhood could hear. And even though I was a couple of miles away, I could still hear those fireworks whenever one of my guys hit a home run, and it was really exciting. I was one of those kids, I was one of those 10-year-olds who took his baseball mitt to the ballpark with him when he went to see a game. I wanted maybe to catch a foul ball, but really I just wanted to have my mitt with me because those guys out on the field had their mitts with them. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be a pro baseball player. This was not a career plan. This was a vision. It was a hope. I wanted to be like them. I remembered that 30 years later when I was 40 years old, and I heard on the news that the great pitcher Orel Hershiser was also 40 years old. He was born the same year I was, and he was still pitching. He was still throwing a lot of strikes. And I joked that as long as he was still pitching, I still had a chance at the big leagues. Maybe I could make it. Now, it should be noted that he and Rickey Henderson were the only two 40-year-olds in the big leagues that year. They were the oldest people in the big leagues that year. And in those 30 years that separated my 40-year-old self from the 10-year-old self who took his mitt to the ballpark, I had shifted from admiring and emulating the players on the field to admiring and marveling at how they could do things that I had never been able to do, even when I was in my 20s, as most of the players on the field were. Sometimes admiration motivates us, sometimes it demotivates us. It seems to me that the praise of the disciples in this morning's story of the Ascension, watching Jesus as he goes up into heaven, is the second kind of praise. It's the demotivating admiration. They're saying, look how great Jesus has become. He overcame death, which we will never do, and now he is going to go up to sit on the throne of heaven. He's the King of Kings, one of a kind in all the universe, not just all of this country or something like that. He is the only one, and the earth is his footstool. And I think they're kind of missing the point. Jesus had just spent the last 6 weeks, showing them that God was bringing transformation out of his death. And the possibility of new life and deep joy is always present, even in death and loss. His ascension into heaven was not the end of transformation. It was not the goal that was achieved and which marked the completion of resurrection so that it was now done and the process was over. Rather, ascension was the next transformation. Okay, he said, after 40 days of seeing me come back, and back to you to visit you again, having risen from the dead, you've finally caught on to what resurrection is. Watch again. It keeps going. New life keeps being new. Transformation keeps transforming. I do not find it helpful to say that resurrection reverses or overcomes death. I do find it helpful to say that we discover new life where we expected to find nothing but the remains of death. I do find it helpful to point out that there is joy where the only thing we expected to find was sadness. And the joy is neither a betrayal of the legitimate sorrow nor a vanquishing of it. Rather, joy is possible even though we have suffered loss and heartbreak. We find joy even as we struggle with loss and heartbreak. It's not the repudiation of them, but rather the rediscovery of new life, even though we have suffered those things and still suffer them. It helps us learn to accept them, learn to live our lives, even when the loss we have suffered made us feel like life was no longer possible. It's the rediscovery that life is possible, even though death and sorrow are real and we feel them. Accepting the loss and sorrow helps us to empathize with each other, helps us to commit to each other, helps us to console and encourage each other, helps us to see the dignity that each of us bears, no matter the differences and hardships that we experience. Today, in addition to being the Sunday following the Ascension, it's also here in Buffalo the beginning of Pride Month, and because Buffalo likes to do it this way, it's the day of the Pride Parade. I'm going to be leaving church, or I should say here in the evening. I left church shortly after the service was over, frustrated that the live stream had failed right in the middle of the sermon. That's why I'm re-recording it now. But some folks from church and I raced up to the top of the parade and joined the rest of Trinity's parade goers and joined them as they came down the parade route pretty close to the beginning of it, and we were able to walk the whole parade route together as a group. It was a great day, full of joy. I love seeing the people in the parade, but I love seeing all of the people on either side of the parade wearing their pride on their sleeves, if they're wearing any sleeves. It's just great. It's full of fun. It's full of the expression of joy in being alive. So I want to think a little bit for a minute about joy and the meaning of LGBTQ pride, for that matter, the meaning of Black pride that came before it. And both still obviously go on. I saw a reminder this morning in my social media that the original Pride Parade was a riot. It was an act of resistance. It was an act of defiance against those who said that LGBTQ folks do not deserve the breath they draw, do not deserve the food they eat, do not deserve the space that they occupy, do not deserve the place in society that in fact is theirs. Even in that first Pride Parade, even in those early days and onward, joy was always a part of it, but I'd like to think that in a way, the fact that the Pride Parade and Pride Month has become a celebration that so many people share in, and so many people find attractive and want to be part of the fun, even if they're not really close to the LGBTQ community. They want to be supportive, and they just want to be part of the scene because it's such a life-affirming, joyful time. I'd like to think that that isn't simply people wanting to get in on a good thing that some other people are doing. I'd like to think that that joy is the defiance, it is the resistance, it is the overcoming of small-mindedness, of hatred, of the desire of some to control and limit other people's lives. It is the maturing of nonviolent resistance. It's the nonviolence of the resistance that Martin Luther King taught about. The joy says, we're here being fully alive, not here to attack or to fight, but simply to live the fullness of our lives that includes our joy. Joy is an act of deep and transformative resistance. It undoes the assumption that we are adversaries of those who feel threatened by us. It is the undoing of our adversarial relationship with those who don't like the fact that we respect the dignity of every human being. But we do. And it gives us a sense of the fullness of God's gift of life to all. So happy Pride.